William Henry Seward was born on May 16, 1801 in Florida, New York. He was one of the 5 children born to Samuel Sweezy Seward and Mary Jennings Seward. As a young child, he was described as sickly and moody, as well as sometimes having resentful behavior. Samuel Sweezy Seward, the father of William, was a successful businessman and doctor. He was also active as a local politician and founded the S.S. Seward Institute in 1846. At a young age, William began to attend a local elementary school. At the age of 12, he then went to S.S. Seward Institute, which was founded by his father. One of William's professors described him as a strong-willed student and also occasionally stubborn. Later, William went to study at Union College at the age of 15. He ran away to Georgia for a brief period of time before graduation, where he taught school and reinforced his passion as an abolitionist. Walter Starr, one of Union's most distinguished alumni, says, "His years spent at Union aided him in laying the foundations of a great empire." Shortly after graduation, he met Frances Adeline Miller, who was a friend of his sister. Her father was Elijah Miller, a judge at the time in Auburn, New York. Coincidentally, William had been looking for someone to study law with privately, so he married Frances on October 20th, 1824. After several years of studying under Elijah, Seward pursued the job of being the Senator of New York. He was successful and served from 1830 to 1834, and also 1839 to 1842. Eventually, he assumed the job of U.S. Senator from 1849 to 1861. Shortly after, he became the Secretary of State, which he is famous for, serving under President Lincoln and also President Johnson for a total of 8 years. Perhaps one of the most important things Seward did during his terms as Secretary of State was organize the purchase of Alaska. The USSR had offered the territory to the US before, but the Civil War had stalled matters. It was also not easy to convince the Senate of the importance of this land. Many thought Seward was a fool for even thinking about this idea. Critics of the deal called it Seward's folly or Seward's icebox. Despite the lack of support, Seward was still determined to attain this land. He took interest in it again when Russia offered it again in 1866. Quickly, he convinced a majority of the US that it was indeed a good idea, and thought it would be a smart move to buy it. He was very excited when Mr. Stockel, the Russian ambassador, told him the Prime Minister had agreed. "I have a dispatch, Mr. Seward, from my government, by cable. The Emperor gives his consent to the cession. Tomorrow, if you would like, I will come to the department and we can enter upon the treaty." "Why wait till tomorrow, Mr. Stockel? Let us make the treaty tonight." "But your department is closed, you have no clerks, and my secretaries are scattered about the town." "Never mind that. If you can muster your legislation together before midnight, you will find me awaiting you at the department, which will be open and ready for business." So, on March 30th, 1867, at about 4 o'clock in the morning, Seward and Stockel both signed the treaty. The Alaskan Territory was officially under the control of the U.S. When Frank Carpenter, the artist of the Emancipation Proclamation, asked, "Governor Seward, which of your public acts do you think will live the longest in the memory of the American people?" Seward proudly replied, "The purchase of Alaska, but," he added, "it will take another generation to find out." Ultimately, the purchase of Alaska was a good move. It supplied the U.S. with an abundance of natural resources such as gold, copper, and petroleum. This also provoked several other gold rushes, for example, the Klondike Gold Rush of the Yukon Territory. People rapidly populated these areas. During the time that Seward organized the purchase, he was recovering from an injury. On the night of April 14, 1865, Seward was brutally stabbed in his house in Washington, D.C., the same night that Lincoln was killed at Ford Theater. It turns out the attacker of Seward, Lewis Powell, was an associate of John Wilkes Booth, the murderer of Lincoln. A total of 6 men were attacked that night. 5 had survived. President Lincoln, unfortunately, was not one of them. A few years after the attack, Seward retired from his job as Secretary of State in 1869. He then went to Alaska in June of 1869, and later went on world tour for 14 months and wrote books about all his experiences. At the age of 71, William Henry Seward dies on October 10th, 1872, because of a short period of sickness. His last words were, "Love one another."